Welcome to the 17th year of Friday Night Photoshop. Tonight I'm going to be talking about a couple of different things, and I'll break this into two categories. The first one is going to be what I'm calling another look at cropping and resizing. And then the second part, we'll talk about brushes and things that we can do with that. So let's jump right in. I'm going to open an image. And I was so fortunate to have been given an image, which I have yet to look at. So I'm going to work with this image. This comes to us from our friend George Verselli, who's a regular to Friday Night Photoshop. And he generously offered up this image. So a couple things I think I'd like to do here immediately is to straighten out the horizon. And I can come over here to this crop tool. If I click this little horizon leveler, if I just click and hold and run this along the horizon, there we go, it just rotates it, and that gets me the horizon, and it crops in and solves that. So that's nice. Okay, when it comes to cropping and resizing, the two things that we have to think about: are we going to be making a print of this, or is it going to be printed, be it in a publication or maybe onto a piece of paper? Or maybe you might want to make a fine art print. Maybe this will go into metal. The fact is, if it's going to something tangible, something you hold on to, then we're going to be wanting to measure this, at least in this country, in inches. If this is something that's going to be projected, put up on a television screen, put up on a projector, put up on a website, something you might look at on a phone, doesn't matter what it is, if it's on a screen of some nature, then we're always going to be expressing the size in pixels. A quick way to remember this: if you're going to go out and make a 8x10 print at 300 dpi, well, if you were to walk into a frame shop and say, "Hi, I need to have a mat for a picture that's 2400 pixels by 3000 pixels at 300 dpi, they're going to look at you kind of funny. But if you go in and say, "Hi, I need to have a mat for an 8x10, they'll know exactly what you're talking about, and they're not going to have to be scratching their heads. So again, if it's a physical print, we do it in inches. If it's going to be something that we see on a screen, in a presentation, anything like that, it's always in pixels. In this image, let's say we wanted to, I don't know, you tell me. Do we want to make a print, or do we want to make this into something for a competition, for instance?
Print.
Print, okay. And how big a print do we want to make?
8.5 by 11.
8.5 by 11. That's a very unique size for a print. So we can do that. So what we're going to do is we are going to have to crop, however, because the aspect ratio of this not 8.5 by 11. It's not even 8 by 11. If anything, it's probably more by like 8 by 12. But if we need 8.5 by 11, here's how I could do it. If I come up here to the crop tool, and I don't want this to be locked, I'm going to come down here to a custom ratio. Now, we don't look at sizes up here when we're doing the crop. We're just looking at ratios. So your interest was to have 8.5, 8.5 by 11. So I just put those two numbers in, and I'm going to say OK. So 8.5 by 11 is what the need is, and so this means we're going to have to crop something out. And so in this scenario, I don't think I like what's in the upper right-hand corner, so I'm just going to eliminate that. And I might even pull this down just a little bit, and maybe pull this over. I kind of like that airplane where it's at. So maybe I would like something like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to commit this, and just by double clicking, I've just cropped this to that size. Now there are some things I could do here. If I just hit auto, this is probably going to punch this up a little bit, and maybe I'd like to sharpen it. These are all Adobe Camera Raw things that we can go over another time. But just for now, we're going to darken the edges just a little bit, and maybe I will take the lightness down just a hair, and maybe even bring the contrast back just a little. Okay, so now to get this to be 8.5 by 11, now this is where I click on this hyperlink down here on the bottom, and this is where I'm going to be declaring a size. So in this case, on the long side, I need 11, right? Well, because I cropped this to an aspect ratio of 8.5 by 11, by default, this is 8.5 on the short side. Now I'm telling this to resize on the long side. I could have, if I wanted to, chosen the short side, and in here I could put in 8.5, right? And look, I still have 11 by 8.5. So whichever floats your boat, whichever way you want to go, you can do long side or short side. I usually do long side. It's just what I like to do. And there it is. Now, because we're making a print, we have to ask ourselves two questions now. Are we going to print this on an Epson printer? If so, this becomes 360. If we're going to print this on a Canon or an HP, or maybe we're going to send this off to some print house somewhere, it's going to want to be 300 pixels per inch. And I'll say okay to this. Now we're not done yet. What I need to now do is to open this image. And when I open this, this is going to spawn Photoshop, and it brings it right into Photoshop. Here it is. And if I take this and go up to image and image size, here's the checksum, folks. Here's how you know that you've got it to the proper size. This is 8.5 by 11 inches. So we've just sized this to exactly fit a standard letter size piece of paper, which is an odd size by all rights, because usually we'd be doing like an 8 by 10. But the beauty of Photoshop is we can make it pretty much whatever you want. I'm the guy who goes to the yard sale and somebody will have a mongrel size frame that's got museum glass in it, and they're selling it for 50 cents because who the heck is ever going to find a print that's 9 inches by 19 inches, right? Well, with Photoshop, you can go in and do that. And you can make it whatever size you want, crop it into whatever you want, and then go make the print. Now, if you're going to print this, one thing that's going to be a consideration is finding a printer that can do this. The next size up would be 11 by 14. And that's probably what I'd be recommending, is that you send this out to make an 11 by 14. Here's what it's going to look like when you get it back. If I go to canvas size, and if I just put in the width to be 14 and the height to be 11, that's what you're going to be getting if you have this sent out to make an 11 by 14. A lot of print shops know what to do with an 11 by 14 a lot quicker than they know what to do with an 8.5 by 11. So you would make this print choosing the next size up that makes the most sense, and that would be this size. And then you could actually keep that white in there if you wanted as a border or as a mat. That doesn't look too bad. And if you look at the image size now, you'll see that it now is an 11 by 14. And now you could send this off to a fine art printer or to someplace even local and have an 11 by 14. Some places call these posters. I think it's kind of a small poster. But you could have this printed, and then this would easily fit into an 11 by 14 frame, which is a pretty standard size frame. I know this is pretty simple for cropping and resizing. We've been over this hundreds of times. I welcome you to go take a look at my session from last year, where I go into a whole lot more detail on cropping and resizing. There's some even easier ways to do it, but tonight I'd like to show you something a little bit different with respect to cropping and resizing. So let me go to that. I have a neighbor who had this idea, and I have to give it to him. I thought it was pretty cool. That he went and he bought this frame that goes around a license plate. And here I wasn't able to fit the whole thing in my scanner, but you get the idea. You see where the holes are, where this would mount to the car, and the license plate would go behind it. And he has a family member who has dogs. And he thought, wouldn't it be cool to take this license plate frame and use it as a photo frame? It's different. I've never seen this done before. So the question is, how do we fit a photo into this license plate frame? Well, first of all, we need to know some dimension. If I take a ruler and measure the frame, the inside dimension for where the picture would be seen is effectively 11 inches across by, I'll say about 5 inches, 5 1/8, but let's just say 11 by 5. Well, that doesn't conform to anything. So 11 inches across by 5 inches up and down. I need to come up with something that's going to fit into that. So how am I going to do that? Well, let's first of all look at the picture that he had to work with. So this is the picture of the dogs. And if I just take and open this up, if I go and say a custom size here of 11 by 5 and say, all right, well, what makes sense? I would like to see the dogs' paws, but we also want to see their heads. I don't want to cut off ears, and I don't like the fact that we don't have the whole dog on the left. So this just is not fitting this frame. So what I need to do is I need to find some way to add to this so that I can crop and have a presentation of just the dogs. So what I'm going to do here is get rid of this crop, and I'm just going to say full. And as far as the size goes, I am going to upsize this just a little bit. So I'm going to go to 12 inches on the long side. And I'll say okay, and I'm going to open this up. So this just opened right into Photoshop. Now I'm going to bring out layers, and this is coming up on a layer, and I'm going to enter up here the 11 by 5. That was the size, right?
Yes.
And thank you. And now I'm going to go ahead and do the crop here, but I'm going to oversubscribe. I'm going to go outside of the boundaries like this. And I'm looking for the dog's paws and for the ears, and I'm wanting to include all the dogs. There we go. So now I've got something that's going to fit into this license plate frame that's going to be used as a frame for this photo. Now the problem is this doesn't look really good because what am I going to put on the edges? Well, if I come up here and use the tragic wand tool and just click and then go shift click over here, so you see I'm making a selection of these edges. Now if I right click and say grow, that's going to make it slightly bigger. It's going to cut into the actual image. Now I'm going to go up here to the rectangular marquee tool, and when I come down here and right click, we see all the usuals, but there's this one that's called Generative Fill now. I'm going to click on that. What would you like to generate? Fill, DG, fill edges and background. And I'll say generate. Let's just see what happens. Boom. That's going to fit in the license plate holder quite nicely.
Wow. Amazing.
It knew to continue with this plant. It knew how to fill in the backside of this dog. Now, it's given me some other options. Here's another one. Maybe I like that one better. It doesn't have as much clutter in the background. Here's another one. Nah, I don't like that one as much. So maybe I like this one better.
Yeah.
And remember, we're not going to see some of the edges because this license plate frame, just like a regular image that you would have, is going to be hiding some of the edges. So I don't care that this is a little weird down here and that the bottom's a little funky, and we're never going to see that. Once the license plate, once it gets printed, once this goes over the license plate, then it's going to be fine. Now, if we look at this from a layers perspective, you'll see that we've got this layer where just the edges have been filled in. Because this is where we started, remember? And all I did was to simply oversubscribe, and that filled that in. Now, folks, this is a live demo. You just saw this happen just as I saw it happen. I would say this is something that's worth going and experimenting with. There has been a lot of discussion and a lot of interesting, almost arguments about AI, artificial intelligence. And I recognize that it's not for everybody. I get that. And I also recognize that there are places that it should not be used. But for this case, for my neighbor who wants to give this to I think his son who owns these dogs, and as a joke, he wants to put it in his license plate, I see no problem with this at all. For what this is, I think that this is pretty cool.
I think it's really neat.
I think it's pretty cool.
I agree, except you might want to
amazing.
know what that dog's tail really looks like before you accepted that, because maybe the dog doesn't have a curly tail. That's being picky, I know, but to the people who own the dog, it might make a difference.
Well, considering how, again, it started like that.
Right. I understand. It's very good. I'm just saying, if you have something that's a reference point like that, you might want to look at another picture of that dog that shows his tail so you could make a decision.
Well, in this scenario, this was what I call the given set. This is all I had to work with.
Yeah, I get
and
it.
and it's not like I could go and take that picture again.
Right.
I'm not even
get
sure
it.
that these dogs are in Maine.
Yeah, I get it. But you see my point.
Oh yeah, I do. But I think you see mine too. I mean,
I do.
all being respectful here, and I'm not trying to say one thing's right and one thing's wrong. That's not the point of this. I just want to show that here is a case where I think it worked pretty well. And I'm impressed that I'm able to give this picture to my neighbor. And I told him, I said, hey, you're going to like this image. And I know he's going to. And he won't even know that I did this, but I'm going to tell him because I want him to know that, hey, this is pretty cool. And maybe if he watches this replay, he'll appreciate it even more.
I agree. It can really be a helpful thing with certain circumstances. And I'm not arguing that at all.
Yeah. Now, if we look at this, there are some tools that were in our toolbox before that you could use content-aware fill, and you could stretch this and all those sorts of things. But honestly, I don't think it's half as good as that. So here's a new look at cropping and resizing, one that we've never seen before in Photoshop. And like I say, go back and take a look at the tutorials I've done in the past for doing traditional cropping and resizing. I just thought you all might want to take a look at something that's a little bit different that I happen to come across. And for me, this worked pretty good. Well, I'm not going to go into a whole lot more with Generative Fill tonight. I just wanted to show it and show it as a adjunct to cropping and resizing, because it filled that niche, I thought, really nicely, because again, I had this need and this happened to work. And I think my neighbor to whom I'm going to be handing this tomorrow is going to be very pleased with it. So the next thing I'd like to talk about tonight is brushes. So now let's just do a quick introduction to brushes and some things that we can do with brushes. Now, I'm going to first of all start with an empty slate, and I'm just going to make 8 inches by 4 inches, and I'm going to have a white background, which is fine. I shut off art boards. That can be a little bit of a menace, so we don't need that. And I'm going to say create. So here's our canvas. Typically, we would come over and grab like a paint tool and then the brush tool, and we can use the bracket keys to make the brush bigger or smaller. By the way, if you ever bring up a brush and you don't see the brush, check your caps lock key. There's a very good chance that your caps lock is turned on. So with this brush, I can just go ahead and just, freely draw and do things like this. And if only I could take this and print this and sell it for $1 million, it'd be great, but no. All right, so I'm going to eliminate that, but let's go see what we can do. If I use this little pull down up here, we've got all sorts of different brushes from which we can choose. And if I look down through some of these are different. If I look at this one, I have not used this one. Look at that. That's pretty interesting. It kind of smudges it, doesn't it? That's pretty cool. There's so many different brushes. There's so many different things that you can do. And oh, look at that. It's actually going to there you go. It can be a little rain cloud, right? All right. I'm not going to quit my day job here and pretend that I'm ever Bob Ross, but the point is there are some interesting brushes up here. I've got a couple of brushes that are unique to me. One is my email address and one is my website. And if I just choose my email address, I should be able to come over here and make this bigger. And if I just click once, you see it's like I'm painting with that. Now, what's kind of funny is I can actually take and drag this. And I'm using my name, my email address as a brush, which seems kind of silly, but you can do that. I do a couple of Control Z's here, and now I'm going to come up and I'm going to grab my website, and I'm going to just click this once, and there's my website. And if I go a little bigger, I can go click and put it in just like that. So this gives me some interesting things that I can do with text by making a brush. Now, how do we make a brush? Let's see if we can make that work. So first of all, what we need to do is we need to start with a blank Photoshop canvas, which is what we've just done right here. We've got this. And now we need to make a new layer. So I'm going to hit plus. Now we're going to draw or place an image that we're usually going to want to do this in black. So I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to grab a brush. We're going to paint with black, and I need the flow to be 100%. And again, I'm going to make this a little smaller, and I'm just going to make some design. So maybe I'll just do something like this. So I've just done that. Okay. Now we need to select the object. So by using the rectangular marquee tool, I'm just going to go ahead and say select the object. So I've just made a selection right there. Here's the important part. Under the edit, we have to choose define brush preset. So if we go up here to edit, define brush preset, we have to name this brush. I'm just going to title this FNPS DEMO, Friday Night Photoshop Demo, right? And I'll say OK to that. Now we can make adjustments to this brush however we might want. First of all, I'm going to get rid of that selection because we don't need that anymore. But when I come back over here to this paintbrush, look at what I've got. I can make this a little smaller, and I can go click. I can come over here and grab a color, and I can go click. I can actually paint with that if I wanted. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense to do, but it's possible. I could do something like this where I make a big and then go grab black and go a little offset, and that's kind of like a little drop shadow, right? So anything I put up on the screen, I can turn into a brush. And the key is to do it such that the background is transparent, because you wouldn't want the white background to be part of the brush. Now, you could type something up here. You could put up your email address. You could put up your website. You could scan your signature. Go sign your name using like a Sharpie onto a white piece of paper and scan it. And then you could take that and make that a brush. So you could then go and just paste that anytime you needed to have your signature maybe on a document. Now, if I come up here to tools, this is where we can give this a different name, or we could delete the brush if we don't like this. I don't happen to like this, so I'm going to delete the brush. Is it okay to delete this? I'm going to say yes. Now, it happens to still be there just because I've been using it.
When you did the pull down from the edit, what did you go to at the top initially to like name it?
First thing I had to do with the pull down was to, under edit, I have to choose define the brush preset
Okay, so it's edit define brush preset.
right there.
Okay, I see it.
And that's where you're going to define the area that you want for the brush. We'll do it again. So let's just go ahead and say, again, I'm drawing in black, and I'm going to bring up just a simple brush here, hard round, and I'm going to make this a little smaller. I don't know why this is not changing when I bring this over, but let's just say if I were to do something like this. Okay, kind of ridiculous, but there it is. Now, I did this on the background. So that means that if I do a brush here, I'm going to be including all of the white. But if I don't want that white, what I would have to do here is I'd take the magic wand tool. First of all, we have to get rid of this being a background, make it a layer. I take the magic wand tool and click, and I just say delete. I click again, say delete. So now I've got this drawing just over on a transparent layer. This is where I have to then go and draw the box. Now I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to choose define brush preset. And I'm going to title this FNPS 2, which may or may not exist. There we go. Now if I look at my brushes, here's FNPS 2. So now if I want to, I can go ahead and draw this multiple times. I always forget to shut off the selection. But I can go grab this brush and I can draw this in different colors if I so want. Talk about abstract art.
If I wanted to use it as a watermark and so I would need to fade the opacity, I'm assuming you can do that, right?
Absolutely. So what I would do is I'd put it on its own layer, and let's make this black. And if I were to put this up here like that, I can now take the opacity and make that whatever level you might want.
Okay, good.
And you can change the size of that. Is that right? By using the bracket tools?
That's right. So here we go. Now I'm on a layer that the opacity is not 100%, and that's why we're seeing this look like it does. Kind of weird, but to think that artwork that looks like this has been sold for millions of dollars, I just feel like I'm in the wrong field. But okay. Well, that's something for you to go and play with and experiment with, and I think you might have some fun with that. I'm going to go back to my clean slate here, and I'm going to open up another new slate. This time, what I'm going to do is maybe I'll make this a little darker blue. So a real quick way to do that, I just go do a Control U. We'll just dim this a little, and we'll go find blue. We'll bring up the saturation. That's more of a lavender. There we go. That's a nice blue. Now, hopefully you all had a chance to go over to Friday Night Photoshop and download a little gift that I gave you all, and that is some snowflakes as brushes. Now, what we're going to do with that is if you've downloaded those, and hopefully you've put them into a folder that you might happen to call brushes. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose a brush, and we're going to go up to this little tab that says click to open the brush preset picker. I open this up, and now I'm going to come over to this little gear that's up in the upper right hand corner. And one of the choices we have here is to import brushes. When we choose that, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate to wherever it is you saved that we transfer with the different brushes. And then we're going to load them. Now I've already done this on mine, And here's what it looks like. I get this little folder here with all these brushes. And if I choose one and come over, just do a click, there's a snowflake. I can tip that over and do a white snowflake. And another white snowflake. I can go back to the picker and pick another snowflake. And you see up top here, this is showing us what that snowflake looks like. Here's a cute little one. I'll just go tap. Look at this, it's actually got shades. Now if I were to move this, look at what we're getting. Like we're painting with a snowflake. And by the way, we don't have to have just white. We could have black. We could pick a color. We could have some red snowflakes if we wanted. So here are a number of snowflakes that you can go and work with and have some fun with. And by the way, you can also use the tool to make them bigger or smaller. That's the bracket keys. And again, if you move these, now you'll find that there's different brushes with lots of different icons and things that you'll find. The snowflakes I thought were just appropriate for this time of year because you could use it to create, say a photo greeting card, and you might want to put a snowflake in it, or two or three. So we can very easily make a background, can't we? I'm just grabbing some different brushes here. Let's just go grab green, why not? Put some green snowflakes, right? Maybe I need a smaller one up here and one here. So we can have a lot of fun with this. So there's a quick primer on brushes. And there's a lot more to explore, and I would urge you to go and take a look at some of the things you can do. And now that you've got some snowflakes to have some fun with, why not add some snowflakes to your presentations? So that wraps up this edition of Friday Night Photoshop. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again.